Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Visual Lounge. We've got a fantastic show. I'm your host, Matt Pierce. I'm the Learning and Video Ambassador for TechSmith. We are going to be talking about repurposing content. And in particular, we're going to talk today about repurposing video. And if you're not doing that, you're not thinking about how you can repurpose your videos, how you can get more bang for your buck, if you will, then it's something you really should stop and think about. And we have a fantastic guest who is going to be able to help talk us through some of the things that we should be thinking about with repurposing content, because she is an expert and a master at doing just that. So let me introduce our guest today. Amy Woods is an expert in content repurposing and the founder of Content 10X, a niche creative agency. She helps content creators grow their audience by maximizing their return on the content they create. She works with businesses, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders, and is a content repurposing powerhouse behind some of the most well-known podcasts and video shows, including this one, I should say. Amy is the host of Content 10X podcast, and she's the author of the best-selling book, Content 10X, More Content, Less Time, Maximum Results, the ultimate guide to reaching more people online with your content. She talks on stages all around the world about content repurposing, including at events like Podfest, Multimedia Expo, Podcast Movement, Youpreneur Summit, and Radio Days. And we're going to add to that illustrious list now that she's here on the Visual Lounge. Welcome, Amy. We're glad you're here.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, and thanks for such a nice introduction as well.
Oh, you are so welcome. I'm just thrilled that you're here, because let me just lay some groundwork. So we get to work with you here at TechSmith, and you help us take things like the Visual Lounge and turn it into content. And I just want to say the work that you and your team do is just so impressive, and it's really cool to see. Kind of like I'll say it's been a mind expanding opportunity to see like one thing that we've done and turn it into, I don't know, multiple 20, 30 pieces of content is pretty cool.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to work with you as well, and work with such high quality content. It makes it easier to do our job when we work with such pros like you guys. So yeah, thank you as well.
I hope everyone heard that. I was just called a pro, so I'm feeling pretty good already. This is my favorite interview so far. Amy, for those who I read your introduction, but I'm curious, for those who haven't had a chance to meet you, or what would you tell our audience that's listening about yourself?
Oh, something about myself. Is this one of those kind of that people won't know questions?
No, just a general background, just to help them to get to know you and your organization a little bit better than what I've said already.
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from a management consultancy background, funnily enough. So I worked for 13 years as a management consultant with Accenture before I started my business. So that was kind of working with Fortune 500 companies. Mainly my area was mergers and acquisitions and integrations and things like that. So quite different to what I do today. Started Content 10X just over 3 years ago. As you mentioned, so we work with businesses that create episodic content. So businesses that have perhaps a weekly live stream, weekly video, weekly podcast, that kind of thing. And we repurpose the content for them. And it really doesn't matter what industry the clients are that we work with, but it's all about taking quality content and then doing so much more with it. So the Content 10X, we have a whole stream of different disciplines, different specialists that go into repurposing, which I guess is what we're going to touch on today, kind of what goes into it and what is it. But yeah, and as you said, as well as the service for myself, I do speaking, and I did I did do speaking, haven't done an awful lot in the last year or so, and I wrote my book, and I live in the UK, live in Manchester in the UK.
Perfect. So Amy, one of the questions that I was going through and preparing to talk with you today that came up, I'm curious where the idea of creating like repurposing content really came from. You talked about, I was curious, does it come from the consulting background, or is there something that you've seen that made you stop and think and say, like, this is such a great opportunity and not enough people are doing it?
I think it's a blend of both. So I think that the consulting side of me kind of saw this massive opportunity to bring systems and processes to creating content, and it saw this opportunity to get more of a return on investment from the time and the cost that you put into creating content. So I guess like from that side, that's where things went off in my head in terms of there's a big opportunity here, and it's something that more people should do. And then in terms of from a business perspective, then why did I set it up? It also comes down to seeing the opportunity, I suppose, in the marketplace too, in terms of I didn't really, see anybody else offering content repurposing as a niche like specialist service to content creators. And I was trying to blend the mix of my love for creativity and my love for just coming up with new ideas and being super creative, but also the thing inside me that is very kind of process and system orientated, and kind of bringing that together, which I think are the two key important factors in really effectively repurposing on a weekly type basis, or more than weekly. But when you're creating episodic content, you need systems and processes, but you do need to be super creative as well, because repurposing is not copying and pasting or just reposting the same things, or at least not in the way that we do it. So it's the blend of both really that I think appealed to me and made me think that there was an opportunity to do something with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's awesome, because I do know as a content creator, as someone who's doing this, that it is challenging to find the time, kind of the headspace, and all the things that are needed to really repurpose content and not just be a copy paste. Like, I think obviously that's like kind of baseline, you can do that, but I think that's one of the things I've been really thinking about lately with repurposing content is, how do I get better at it? How do I make it so it's part of the process? Because I think what happens is, we as creators, we get so busy and we're so focused on the main output that we forget that there's, like, we're thinking always, what's the next thing we've got to create? But the reality is, and what I've learned from you, Amy, is I don't have to create the next thing necessarily. I've got great content that probably people didn't see, they didn't pick up on, and if I can use that to, I mean, I love the 10x part of it, right? I can really amplify whatever it is that I'm doing. Let's talk a little bit specifically about video content, because we're at TechSmith, we're all about making a lot of video content, image content. So I'm guessing that there's people that are watching this who they're not thinking about this idea of repurposing their content. For you, what are the keys to, like, someone being able to have content that we'll say that is good to repurpose? Because I'm guessing, like, you could repurpose anything, but there's probably things we could be doing to make it better or more, I guess, more easily repurposed. Do you have any suggestions or advice for I'm thinking for myself, but also for my audience?
Yeah, so I think that there are certain things that make content more repurposable. Like you said, you can probably say you could repurpose most things, but to make it more repurposable and to make sure it's kind of quality coming out of quality, I think that, well, firstly, it's good to have an evergreen approach, I think, to content, and to when you're repurposing content. Something great about doing that is that you can do a live stream like we are today, but then the repurposed content can go on not just for the week or the month afterwards, but it can be in your kind of treasure trove, your vault of great content for a long time, and you can be bringing out tips and snippets and all sorts of value from something that was a while ago in the months and years to come. So I think one aspect is thinking about that in terms of if you're really going to be going all in on repurposing, think about a content format that is perhaps quite evergreen and will stand the test of time. I think another thing that I really promote is looking at ways that perhaps you could segment your content as well. And I mean that from the point of view of when we're talking about video, so video repurposing. If you can come up with a format for the videos that you create, whether it's pre-recorded videos, interviews, talking head thought leadership style videos, whatever they are. But if you can come up with formats where there's certain segments to your content, then that can mean that it repurposes really well as well, because you can repurpose the same kind of segments every single week. And an example that I love to give for this goes into the TV world. So I love the TV chat shows and the way that they do their repurposing. So my example is on the Late Late Show with James Corden. He has carpool karaoke as a segment in his show, and then that gets repurposed as a standalone piece of content that goes onto their YouTube. I don't know about in the US, but in the UK, there's even a carpool karaoke TV show where it's just the carpool karaoke's that is done that you watch on TV. So it's a separate TV show from a segment of a TV show, and people can be fans of that. I will admit that I don't think I've ever seen an entire episode of his Late Late Show, but I'm like a fan of the segments of his show. I'm quite a fan of carpool karaoke, and I'm quite a fan of the wind-ups that he does and things like that. And if you haven't seen what I'm talking about on that show, I probably can think of other TV talk shows that do similar, where they have these special segments in the shows, and you could take that segment out, and you could almost have fans of the segment even if you don't have fans of the whole show. And I think, that's just an example, but thinking about, so from like B2B marketing type videos, thinking about maybe having the same 3 killer questions that you always ask, like a guest, or the same quick fire round or something like that. And then when you're repurposing that video content, you could always do your 1 minute teaser on Instagram could always be the quick fire round or something like that. So that's a great way of thinking about how you can be breaking videos for more video content, and then other forms of content too. And I guess the other thing I was just going to say is structure as well. So it comes in with segmenting, but just when we work with content, when the content is really well structured, it's just a lot easier to repurpose as well. So having, like similar kinds of formats, having a decent structure to the content, and it will always, go on to repurpose further. Interviews are great for repurposing because you can get so much out of the conversation. But if you're doing solo type thought leadership videos, then what I mean by structure is perhaps talking about, the 10 reasons why you should create video, that kind of structure to it, like lists, that kind of thing, because then that content can be far easily repurposed than when maybe it's a, kind of long, rambling, like a structureless video.
No,
So yeah. Yeah.
these are awesome. And so a couple of things that I want to kind of summarize what you said, because I think there's a lot to unpack here. I love the idea of evergreen. And for anyone that's listening, if they don't know that term, it just means content that can live. It's not dated easily, right? Like you're not probably talking about specific events in time, or we had a great piece of content that was about how to do green screen, like how to create green screen video. That thing just kept going. Like it was a blog post, it just kept going and going and going and going, because that was content people still needed a year, 3-5 years after it was originally written. The segment idea is really interesting because I think all of a sudden you can create this, you can package content in different ways, which I'm thinking about. That's really exciting, right? Because I might have seen this segment here, but then I want to see what maybe another guest did or another guest, and I can bring that all into new content that's going to allow maybe new eyeballs or people to see things that aren't things that they saw before. And then the last one that you said is just building a common structure, which I'm also taking notes, and I'm thinking, oh man, Amy's probably thinking every time they get one of our videos, like they could do this better, they could do this better, they could do this better. But the structure, right? Having a consistent, so people know what people like consistency. They know what to, like, as much as I think people say, oh, I don't mind surprises. They want to know what's going to come, what's coming next, right? They want to know that if Matt has an introduction, then there's going to be this piece, and then there's going to be this piece. So I love all these ideas, and that it's not just solely about like, how do I take this one piece of video and chop it up into 12 different things? It's really thinking about like along, the one video, but then along the 12 different videos. I can hear, the back of my head, the voice that says like the naysayer, it says like, Amy, that's a lot of work. And obviously not everybody can work with Content 10x as much as we'd want to encourage them to do so. But like, what strategies do you have to say, like, how does someone go about getting better at repurposing content in a very, I'm talking about the actual work part of it. Are there things that you've found along the way that have helped you guys to get faster and able to do that kind of consistently better?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as you said. I think it like often creators, the passion often comes with the creating of that first original content, and it's probably a lot more appealing to then go on and start planning the next, original piece of content, the next video, as opposed to sitting down and doing all the work that goes with the repurposing. So I think I mentioned at the start, I'm a big fan of systems and processes, and I think something that you really do need to do is incorporate a process that you follow for each piece of content that you create that ensures that you are going to do the repurposing. And I almost, to the point, say that you should make a rule with yourself that you have to tick everything off that process checklist before you allow yourself to go on and create the next piece. Doesn't necessarily work, because I'm also a massive fan of batching as well, and saying that you should batch content depending on what, pre-recorded or live. But I think so using a tool. So if you have a project management type tools that you use, like Trello. We love Trello. There's Basecamp, there's Asana. I hear a lot of people talk about ClickUp recently. Haven't used that, but those kind of tools. So the online project management, task management type tools. I think something that will really help is to firstly just bring that process and structure. So decide what you are going to do, what you are going to repurpose the content into. Another thing is to maybe try not to do everything and just try to be consistent. So if you try and do everything, if you think, okay, I'm really inspired, so from now on I'm going to do a weekly video, and then I'm going to repurpose that into a blog post. I'm going to create 10 square teaser videos that I'll put on Instagram. I'll do a bunch of short story videos. I'll create quote graphics, and so on and so forth. I think you might end up doing all of that passionately for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then it will start to drop off because it's a bit too much, and it's maybe taking on, it's kind of you don't go out the door and run a marathon when you're training for a marathon. You go and run 5 miles, then 6 miles, and 7 miles, and you build up. I think in the same way, don't try and take on too much. Just try and build habits first. Try and build a process that you're going to follow, and try and make that habitual. So if that is just that with every single video that you do from now on, you are going to turn it into a long form blog post, and you're going to always have that blog post going onto your website as well, and do that on a regular basis, and have the process that you'll follow for that. The writing blog posts, there's still work with that. There's still, images for the blog post and the SEO aspects and getting it on your site. So even just saying that one thing, it's not a small one additional task. Or maybe you'll stick with video, but you'll take one video and you will edit that, because that might be more your area of expertise. If you're in video anyway, you'll edit that to some shorter teaser videos. But whatever it is, just get regular with that. And then when you are regular with that, then start to look at the more that you can do. And I think just really importantly is paying attention to where your audience are as well. So as well as not biting off more than you can chew from what your create perspective, don't try and be absolutely everywhere if your audience aren't there. So just try and restrict the channels that you want to be putting content out on. And so develop the process, try and make it a habit, don't take on too much, and just build it up over time, and look at what's working and just have an open mind, I think.
No, what great advice. And one thing I've noticed that you guys do for us that I think is really helpful here, and to add to this, if I may, is the idea that you've templatized a lot of things, right? Like there's
Yeah,
certain
yeah,
components that you don't have to stop and recreate. Like, and I do this to myself all the time. I'm like, oh, I want to make something. I'm gonna make 10 things, and then all of a sudden I'm making like 10 individual things, and then the next time I'm like, I don't want to make 10 more things, and it's like, but
yeah,
having some basic themes and templates that I think it's good to shift over time, so it's not always, over 2 years you're not doing it just the same 10 looking things that all look alike. But I found that to
yeah.
be incredibly useful and helpful for my own thinking for content. So what great advice. You did break up a little bit there. I just want to let everybody know Amy's been having terrible internet today. So if we lose her or something happens, our apologies. But we'll keep going as long as your internet signal is strong. If you don't mind, I would like to go to a comment from the audience and get your take on it, Amy.
Yeah.
Club KMA. Let's see if I can find their comment here. Post onto the says, in repurposing video, could a similar process be used for taking a long video and breaking it down into individual small parts for shorter social stories? And they go on to say an example would be business values, long video, then each value posted separately for ease of viewing and getting better chance for a 1 minute view versus 10-minute views. So any thoughts about that?
Oh yeah, I mean that's I really recommend that approach, and it's that example of there was the structure there of like the 10 posts, so you can get 10 videos from that. So yeah, I really recommend that. I'm assuming that the longer video would perhaps be something going on the website and perhaps like YouTube, and then the shorter videos are going to go on the social media platforms. So yeah, I really recommend that. Just then you just need to pay attention to the platform that you're posting on, from a aspect ratio perspective, and what the look and feel of what the template should look like, as you just said, Matt. Create the right templates and the right look and feel for the different platforms. But I highly recommend that. And in that case, just make it part of the editing process. When you've edited that video, you haven't finished at the point that the 10-minute one comes off. You finished at the point that you've then edited down into the shorter sections. But yeah, really, really recommend doing that. It's just such a great way to get people to the longer form, or just they get the value that they want from seeing that one great piece of advice, that great value that you shared in the shorter video.
Yeah, and I would even recommend Club KMA that you think about when you're creating that video, build it so it's easy to edit. Like I do this a lot of times where I'm like, I'm just going to go through rapid fire the things I'm going to say. But if you just took a little time to structure and say, I'm going to leave a little bit of kind of space and breathing, not speaking, it's much easier to cut those pieces out, have them, maybe you do something so you're repeating like number 2, blah, 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 blah. So it makes it just so it could stand alone easier. I think just any planning you can do in advance. But I actually took this advice, Amy, looking at all the content that I've seen your team doing. And I create a lot of PowerPoint presentations for a lot of virtual events now because we're not in person. And I have a slide deck, and I was thinking, I need to promote for this particular event the fact that I'm speaking. And it was 7, I think it's like 7 myths of video creation. And, I don't want to give away all the information because I want people to go to the presentation, but I have like 7 slides that are like number 1, and it just says the title of what it is. And so I basically loaded those up as tweets, and I can share those
Oh,
out
brilliant.
just easy. And so I think as you're thinking about this, as we're talking here, I'm thinking, okay, there's some effort here. This isn't free. There's some process you're going to have to either wrap your head around, develop. But from let's that work and effort, what for you have you seen as kind of the general kind of return on it, that investment, if you will? I don't think we need to talk dollars and cents because it's too complicated to, wishy-washy in terms of we don't know real numbers. But what kind of things have you seen as people have been taking on the effort of repurposing their content in terms of their reach or their ability to get their message out, generally speaking?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it really depends on what your overall goals are with the content. Full stop. So if you're creating video content predominantly for YouTube, is your overall goal to grow a YouTube channel, get loads of subscribers, and start to monetize a YouTube channel, or is your overall goal still to get in front of as many people as possible. It's reach, and it's ultimately to grow your business and to get people to come over and work with you if you're in that space. So I think it's when you're looking at what are you trying to achieve and how have you seen a return on investment. I think, firstly, you just can't forget that what is the overarching goal of the content, full stop. But I guess what we've seen it, just talking about working with clients, firstly, just new audiences. So growing their audience by creating more content and just growing their audience anyway, but the new audiences too. So people that they wouldn't have reached otherwise if they hadn't repurposed. So I guess a great example of that is when we work with people who are repurposing videos to podcasts, so video and audio. That's where we find people reaching a new audience entirely, because they're reaching people who are just more audio listeners, like more they consume more audio content and don't necessarily consume video content. So they were never finding them until they started to launch something in a completely new place, in a different medium. So it's audience reach, but also new audiences as well that they would never have reached even if they kept doing more and more and more and more videos. They were still never going to reach that podcast audience. I guess they're the really big ones, but also from personal branding perspective, so quite a lot of the people that we work with, the repurposing content is helping them to be more front of mind as well. And I guess the ultimate goal is often to have more authority in their industry and to become more well known as a thought leader in their industry. So a key thing there is the repurposing is helping to keep them on point with what they want to be known for. And it's that whole kind of not having a scattergun approach to lots of different content saying lots of different messages and people not really knowing what they're known for. But because the repurposing is taking something with a big message and breaking the same message, down into smaller messages, it's all still completely aligned with what you want to be known for. And you're being front of mind more continuously, while staying true to the overall message of what you want to be known for. So we just see big kind of personal brand growth, which for a lot of our clients and for us too, is leading to business growth as well. So an increased trust and the trust factor that comes with the content and the repurposing of the content, it's just increasing the number of inquiries, but also it's making the kind of sales process a lot more smoother because people have been, able to consume a lot more content that they would have done otherwise. And in the consumption of content, more and more trust is being built up. So there's really loads of factors to the ROI. There is obviously, like you said, the financial factor, of course, but there's all of those aspects too, the front of mind, the trust, the new audiences, different audiences that play a massive part in it if it's done really well and if it's done right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that, right? That and it goes back to something you said earlier about thinking about where your audiences are, right? And if you think that your potential audience is on a podcast or listening to podcasts, then, and you're already doing something that this is one of the things I love about video, right? Is it's pretty easy to turn a video piece into a podcast or an audio only segment. But I also think there's something to be said about this idea that we can go, I'm going to go to listen to things, or I'm going to go watch things. But if I'm not a video person, I'm not going to watch your video, right? It doesn't matter how good the video is. I mean, I might, but the chances are much lower. But if I'm already in the podcast space, or I'm already on Twitter, or I'm already on Instagram, or wherever I am, you want to really be where they are in a medium, in a format that they're going to appreciate, which I think is this killer advice. One thing that came up in the chat that I think is kind of interesting, and I think it fits in here. Yvonne actually says that she said, repurposing content for me is not something my followers want. They request new information every time they pay for another class with me. The class info is specific to the group hiring me, so I write a description for each class promotion, knowing what my potential audience will want. It takes a lot of time to write new content for every class. So Yvonne's point is she's doing training content or learning some kind of content that she's selling. And I think that probably makes sense that you're not going to necessarily repurpose that content for that particular audience to paying for it. But I guess what advice would you give to Yvonne? Is repurposing just not for her?
It depends what the content is, doesn't it? So I get this a lot where people are worried about the repetitive nature. They're worried that if they repurpose their content, their audience are going to think that they are starting to sound like a bit of a broken record and they're just kind of repeating themselves. And so the argument is I don't think repurposing is for my audience because they demand fresh new content. But it does depend. So I think like would probably need to know a little bit more about what the content is in the context. But just want to make the point that repurposing doesn't need to be repetitive. You need to find creative ways to repurpose where you are trying to look at different angles with the content that you're creating. So when we are breaking down like longer pieces of content, I guess what we're trying to do is look at it from the eyes of almost like a journalist, really, like a journalistic take on extracting like the stories and the different angles that you can take, the different questions that you could ask. So they did this piece of content raise some really great points that could cause a wonderful like conversation to take place on Twitter. So that's not being repetitive. That's just taking something that was said and then putting content, totally different content, going from a long form video to a Twitter thread, something like that, to get people talking and get a conversation going. Or could you repurpose the longer video into a blog post, but where you actually just draw on one aspect of the video and go deeper on that topic to create a slightly different blog post. So it's not always about it being exactly the same thing at all. I think it's about looking at the different angles and the different ways you could take things. And the reason it makes your life easier is because if you've already done the first piece of content, you've put a lot of thought and time and attention into that. So to then kind of study that and just look at some of the different angles and the different ways you can look at that, that's still an easier process than starting from a completely blank canvas. And then you can still lead people back to the original piece or not. That might not be the intention of the repurposed content anyway. But I think in answer to the question, if you're worried about being repetitive, I think it's more about looking at how can you approach it from a different angle. Like I said, for example, like could there be a Twitter thread that you could start? Is there a great LinkedIn post that you could put out? Talking about it in a different way? Is there just a brilliant question that you could pose on Instagram? Is there an Insta stories behind the scenes aspect that you could bring where you're sharing a bit more about the creation of the video in your Insta stories to kind of repurpose more the journey of the creation of that piece of content? So you just need to, I think, just think a bit more broadly to not come across as repetitive. And I totally get the concern of thinking that it could seem like a broken record to your audience otherwise.
Yeah, and Yvonne goes on in the chat and talks about some other specifics of her circumstance, but I think I love this idea of like, because I can feel it in myself sometimes. Like if I had not been through this process, I could be here thinking, I don't know, is this really for me? But I do love this kind of thinking about like how we can get from this one piece of content to many pieces of content and why that can be valuable. I know from a learning perspective, oftentimes, we're so worried about people really being able to perform their job and do stuff. But it's like, well, we've got this one piece of content. Can we create job aids to help them remember how to do that thing? Like we create step-by-step guides, or we do these other pieces that are going to be valuable for them. So yeah, super interesting stuff, Amy. I want to shift gears here a little bit, and I did prep you for this question, so I know it's coming, but I want to get away from the repurposing content in general, and it might come back to that, knowing what your focus is. But one of the questions we've been starting to ask people here on the Visual Lounge is just what's one trend that you're seeing that's starting to impact video right now that you think we as an audience should be aware of? And I know video is not maybe the primary thing you work in, but I would love to know your perspective on this.
Well, I don't know whether or not it's necessarily classified as a trend, but I think that there's more being data content being created and more businesses that I wouldn't have necessarily associated with embracing video content starting to do so. And I think that, I guess, like the trend or what I'm seeing being the reason for that is three things really. So firstly, I think that during the pandemic, when businesses have gone to more working from home, well, completely working from home, remote type ways of working have resulted in lots of video calls. Lots of people spending way too much time on Zoom, and also video trainings, video event, lots and lots and lots of video internally within businesses that may not have happened in the past. Like, for example, the trainings that you would have done in person, businesses looking at, can we deliver this in video? Even just like management addresses to teams, doing like weekly videos instead of stand up in the office and things like that. And I think it's meant that people are becoming a bit more comfortable on camera that maybe wouldn't have even considered or entertained it beforehand. And because of that, there's a bit more that confidence of more internal use of video. I'm seeing that businesses are then starting to think, right, we've always known and heard people talk about how much video content is going to be consumed. And, like, what do we keep hearing this Cisco statistic that like in 20, it was 2020, it'd be 80% video. And then in 2020, it was like by 2025, it'll be 90% video or whatever it is. But, the majority of content being consumed online is video. So many businesses were thinking we should probably do more video, but no, like, that's not for us. There's no one that would want to do video, and we don't think it would be right for us. But I think that the amount of just internally, like the amount of video and the amount of exposure, even if it's video calls and things like that, it started to help people realize that perhaps they could. And then combining that with the fact that we're seeing more people embrace or more people understand that you don't need a really high production value video to still do really well. And I guess what I mean by that is not that you should produce low quality, like terrible videos, but that you don't, maybe where you would have thought previously that you would need to hire a team of a videographer, like hire a video production company, where you would need to hire a studio, and where you would need to have, fairly big budget to have the kind of production value that we see on Netflix, Netflix style production value. But again, we've been challenged that doesn't need to be the case. I was talking before about TV talk shows. We've seen Jimmy Kimmel running his show, or Jimmy Fallon from his kitchen. We've seen James Corden in his garage. We've seen the challenge of, really, is the requirement for that really high production value, and can it still work if you don't have the big budget? So I think combined with people being on camera more day to day as a sudden part of their job because they're not in person with people, and also realizing that you don't need the biggest budget and a videographer and a studio and all of that, more smaller businesses are starting to embrace B2B business, B2B video content as part of their marketing strategies, and realizing that if you create video, as we've been talking about, it's kind of at the top of the content pyramid, because if you have video, you have audio. If you have video, you likely have a blog post or an article that can be written about the video. You have lots of social content that you could extract from it. So realizing that actually the return on investment is going to be there too. And as a result, more smaller businesses are starting to realize that they don't need that massive budget to start creating some decent videos, with people raising their hands now and saying, perhaps I could be the person on camera, the face of the company or the face of the team. So I don't know if that's a trend. Sorry if that's not a really great answer to the question, but I think that's what I'm seeing.
I think that is a wonderful answer to the question, because I think, I see that too, that I think there's barriers. People don't love the way they look. They don't love the way they sound, but people are getting more and more used to seeing themselves and staring back into the camera, and I love what you said, that you don't have to have the best quality in the world. You want to keep growing your quality. You want it to get better. But like if you just got a webcam and a microphone, there's so much content that you can create, and companies are more capable than ever And there's plenty of tools that will enable them, including hint hint, Camtasia Studio, right? Camtasia will allow people to do this content too.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I love what you're saying, because I think what a great thing. And for anyone that's listening to this or watching this episode, if you are in that position, you're thinking, well, I could use to make more video. We have lots of great free resources. Go out to the TechSmith Academy. You can check those out, and you can learn how to write a script. You can learn about storyboarding. You can learn about basics of shooting. We've got how to make screen video, all that sort of stuff, which, and that's the other thing, right? I think, Amy, to your point, is that there's also more resources to help you learn how to do this. 10 years ago, I started doing a live show for TechSmith. And 10 years ago, no one was doing a live show, and it was painful. Like the things that we're trying to figure out to kind of piece together. But now, there's wonderful names out there that will go just teach you everything you might want to know. And probably the problem is there's so much information. Which one do you listen to? But fantastic creators who are willing to share everything they know about creating online video, whether it's live or pre-recorded or whatever. And I guess this is a $10 word we can throw, or a 10-pound word, excuse me, we can throw around. That's, the democratization of video creation, right? Everyone can do it, and you can be successful. So I think that's a wonderful kind of viewpoint, and one that I think we need to pay attention to, because it really could change the dynamic of B2B business, as well as just how people are interacting further. So as we wrap up, Amy, just really kind of what I'd like to do here is two things. One, I'd love you to, if there's anything you would like to share with us in terms of how people could reach out to you or anything. I know you have a book, if you want to briefly talk about that, kind of give your last pitch. And then we're going to do something new here. Your final take, kind of your last words about repurposing content. And then we'll wrap things up for today's episode.
Yeah, so in terms of getting in touch with me, and firstly, just thank you so much for having me on. It's been fantastic. It really, just go to content10x.com, and then if you are interested in the book, if you are wanting to take those steps towards repurposing content, then my book, content10x.com, just /book, or you can find it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble online. It's just Content 10x. So that's probably the best kind of starting point to kind of take that step, and just keep in touch with me as well. If you follow me on social media at Content 10x on all the social media platforms, I like to share lots of content there as well to help people on their repurposing journey. So that would be fantastic. And then a final
kind of your last take on what's your last words about content repurposing for us, that you would, last words of wisdom.
I guess the last words of wisdom are to really think about why you are creating the content in the first place, and to not be so quick to go and create the next piece of content if you haven't got the most out of each piece of content that you create. Because if it's about reaching more people and wanting to connect with more people, then you may just be surprised that you achieve more from really, creatively going to town with repurposing each piece of content than you do with having more of the original pieces. I think you just may be really surprised that you actually connect with more people, because previously you were mainly connecting with those that watch video, and now you're connecting with visual learners, with readers, with people who only go on social media and never look at YouTube or whatever it may be. So just think about the expansion and reach. And if that's what it is, if that is your goal, then you're going to be surprised how many different people you can truly connect with. And I think that's the important word, connection, if you look at repurposing in different ways to suit the individual learning styles and preferred formats of individuals. So just don't get overwhelmed. Just take it one step at a time and see the results. And I promise you will start to see that you do reach more people.
Fantastic. One step at a time. Great advice from Amy Woods. Amy,
Yeah.
thank you again so much. It's always a pleasure to get to talk with you, and been great to hear your words of wisdom and advice. And everyone, go check out Amy's book. Go follow her on social. She's, one thing I've noticed you do, Amy, is you've been reposting and repurposing your own content and it's great. I love the snippets because I don't always have time to go dig into everything. So I love getting those nuggets on a kind of easily digestible basis. So thank you once again. And we really appreciate you being here and all that you've done for us today. Don't forget to go check out all TechSmith's great resources. We've got lots of great resources, lots of great other episodes that can help you to understand how to do some of these things, including editing video for the purpose of repurposing, or just to edit video to make it a little bit shorter. But we appreciate everybody watching and tuning in. And here's the thing. If you're listening to the Visual Lounge or watching it right now and you're saying, hey, this is good stuff, we try to do this weekly. We took a little bit of a break, but we'd love to have you either subscribe to our YouTube channel, download the podcast on your favorite podcast platform, whatever that might be. And we'd love to have you follow along with us, because that helps us know that people are listening and that people are getting value out of it. And if you have a question, you can always email us. You can email thevisuallounge@techsmith.com. And I read those, I check that, and then we'll get back with you and answer questions. And we can, if you got feedback for us, like, hey, Matt, I didn't like your glasses today, or what was your t-shirt? This is the live stream show I used to do 10 years ago. We're happy to indulge you guys there as well. So with that said, we hope wherever you are in your journey, you're creating videos, making images, just learning to create better visual communication. We hope that you take some time to level up every single day. We'll be back again next time, guys, and we will see you when we see you, I suppose.